What's the scariest yet true fact you know of? Story 1. Smoke from a wildfire is enough to kill your car's engine. Evacuate early or stay, prepare, and defend when defendable. But know this, if you're leaving, get out early. Once the smoke is thick enough to choke your engine, you ain't going anywhere. Another scary part of forest fires is the speed and heat. It's really unbelievable just how extreme it can get. We're talking about people being practically cremated in their cars with no time to react. Also, fires in general are very easy to underestimate. If you accidentally light a flame, even if it's tiny, put that shit out immediately if possible, especially indoors. If you can't, then get out. Story 2. Your organs aren't really held in place by much. Your abdominal cavity is exactly that, a cavity. Basically a wet mesh bag full of organs. You can twist organs and never know unless the twist causes issues. Also, accessory spleens are weird. Some people's bodies just decide they need more spleen, so it will grow extra. Story 3, yep, diagnosed with breast cancer at 32. My paternal grandma died of her BC metastasizing. I got tested for BRCA, negative. The tests are very clear that they only test for the gene mutations they know of. It's been 8 years. I keep getting BRCA updates. Always negative. In the time since, both of my mom's sisters have had it. That's both sides of our family. Geneticists are always so open. Just because we can't identify a gene, that doesn't mean it's not there. What scares me? My sisters refuse to get mammograms. They say they're too young. Won't do it. My mom is now on the mammogram train, thank God. But my sisters? Nope, won't do it. Dude, BRCA tests aren't the end-all be-all. It can still be genetic. Just look at our family. If it happens in every generation, in every branch of our family, there's probably something to it. Story 4. So the vagueness of this story is what terrified me the most. So forgive me in advance for being somewhat of a tease, but this one really stuck with me. My childhood best friend's dad was a captain of a major airline for the majority of his career. He was a beer-drinking, dart-playing, super jovial, and all-around fun guy. I never once saw him without a smile on his face. One 4th of July, we're all sitting around having some beers, and it came up in conversation that there had recently been a plane crash, not for his airline, but it was in the news at the time, and he proceeded to tell us a story about how his airline requires him and other pilots to listen to every black box recording whenever there is a major air crash. He begins telling us about this one time he and other pilots had to listen to a recording, and proceeds to tell us the audio was so terrifying that the grown men in the room began to either cry, vomit, or both. My friend and I ignorantly asked, "Well, what did you hear on the recording?" And this man I had always known as being an endlessly happy jokester suddenly donned an intensely solemn expression that I'd never seen before, or since, and said, "I will take that to my grave." While I know many black box recordings exist and are available online, it's terrifying to think of that which was not made public, and just the idea of the panicked sound of a group of people who know their death is imminent. That brief, perhaps 5-minute exchange left a very serious impression on me. Story 5. Only scary because I live in Washington State. The Cascadia subduction zone off the coast of the Pacific Northwest of the U.S. may possibly produce one of the largest earthquakes to ever hit the U.S. within my lifetime. After the earthquakes here in Canterbury, 2010-11, the powers that be did some serious research on the fault line that is the Southern Alps and discovered the very same, and if it goes well, the west coast will be in the Tasman and the rest of the South Island won't really be worth inhabiting. It may never happen, or it could start next week. I wouldn't even want to know what sort of dystopian it could end up like. Story 6. A few of my personal favorites regarding the human body. If a fast-moving ball hits your chest at just the right time, it can cause the heart to stop. Neurocystic urcosis is a condition when pork tapeworms create larval cysts in the brain. A live roundworm, usually found in pythons, was recently extracted from an Australian woman's brain. The youngest pregnancy was in a 5-year-old girl because of early puberty and sexual abuse. Story 7, Vacuum Decay, is pretty scary to think about. Basically, the theory goes that our universe is in a false vacuum. Nature wants to be in its most stable state, so if that's the case, then we could tip over to a true vacuum at any second. This means that everything is destroyed right down to atomic particles. This would happen at the speed of light, so if it did happen somewhere in the observable universe, we would know about it, but we couldn't do a damn thing about it. It's basically instant death on a universal scale. Story 8. During World War I, France and Germany produced a tremendous amount of deadly chemicals for the production of combat glasses. As the war ended, they didn't know what to do with those chemicals, so they sealed them in containers and dropped all of them in the North Sea. One day these containers will be so corroded that they will release the chemicals, poisoning all seas from Finland to Western England and France. Story 9. At all times there are 14 SSBNS, ballistic missile submarines, nuclear payload, that carry at least 20 nuclear ballistic missiles. Each submarine has enough firepower to destroy the world twice over, and it's cruising under the surface undetectable until launch. The missiles it carries are the Trident II D5 MIRV intercontinental ballistic missile with a range of 2,000–12,000 kilometers. Real range is classified, with a 475 kiloton payload. Each missile carries 8 14 warheads that can strike different targets, due to each one having its own guidance system. Story 10. In Australia 2 years ago, there was a massive rural fire that burned parts of rural NSW near Bateman's Bay, Honduras. The intensity of the fire was so bad that the wind created fire tornadoes, and those fire tornadoes created masses of flame balls, which launched down to the ground and exploded. The evacuation was brought to a beach, and everyone had to swim into the water in 40–50 degree heat, cover themselves with a towel, or basically anything to stop burning. The evacs told everyone to either stay in the water and stay safe, or die basically. The heat of the ground was melting people's shoes off, car wheels were melting on the road, and everything. The scariest fact I know from this situation is, if you see the fire masses coming for you, duck under the water. You will not be able to recover from those burns if they hit you. Story 11. Military detective here. I can't really explain much since all of it is classified, but I'll let you in on a secret. If you are not off the radar, you're easily accessible. I'm sure it's not a shock that anyone can find you, but it's scary the ways the government, certain groups of professionals can find you. Put the internet away for a second, even if you disconnect your social media from anything on the internet, even if you relocate, switch cars, and try your best at vanishing away. A true professional will find you physically. Talking from experience, if you ever do something horrible crime-wise, if you see suspicious activity around you, you're probably being stalked and spied on. It goes exactly like in the movies. People who you once knew are being interrogated, and people who ever saw your face are being paid to give information about you daily. I'll give an example from my experience. There's been this dude who completely vanished. After days of looking at his address, he doesn't live there, his car is apparently destroyed, and has nothing under his name. One day, when me and my mates went to a gas station at night to pick some snacks, we already knew every single worker in that gas station, and one of the workers, a slightly fat and didn't look like he could pack a single punch, said that he sees the same man with the same Mercedes at 6 a.m. every day in that gas station. He said that he approached him once to help him, and he slipped a question about his name. He gave the exact name we needed. The same night, we stayed silent in our cars in a shady spot and called our van to arrive, and at 6 a.m. we took him with us. He was charged with 26 different drug-dealing activities in military camps and traffic violations. In summary, if you ever plan to vanish, do it completely and successfully at all cost. Story 12. Back in July, An illegal Chinese biolab was found in California. It was only found because someone noticed a water hose was run into the side of a building through a hole they drilled. The lab had 30-plus refrigerators with HIV, COVID-19, hepatitis, Ebola, and dozens of more infectious disease samples, along with incubators and testing supplies. There were hundreds of dead mice bioengineered to catch and carry COVID-19. The CDC refused to get involved until threatened, and it took them months to do anything. They did less than the bare minimum of testing the samples or research. I just heard about this yesterday, and my guess is most people didn't hear about it at all. Story 13. The False Vacuum Theory. The default position everything tends toward is the most stable state it can possibly be in. The vacuum of space, theoretically, has a potentially more stable state than it currently exists in. If theoretically, this state were to happen at any point anywhere in the universe, it would propagate through space at the speed of light, basically undoing the universe and erasing everything. You would never know it or see it coming because the light from any disappearing galaxies or planets can only travel at the speed of light, the same speed the vacuum decay would travel. Story 14. There was a solar flare just 164 years ago that caused telegraph wires to burst into flames. If a solar flare of that magnitude hit Earth again, it would wipe out our modern infrastructure and send us back to the 19th century. Any computer systems would likely be fried beyond repair, and any systems on those computers would be gone overnight. And because it would travel at the speed of light, we'd only have about 8 minutes of warning before it hit us. Story 15. There are a number of things that vie for the scariest or scariest thing, only some of which I dare put down. But here goes. That there are people who will follow a madman off a cliff because of their own issues and his persuasiveness. That children die from cancer, accidents, or war. That love can hurt if you lose that person. That most religions don't really tell people the truth about God's love and purpose. That people seem to be losing their thinking ability in many cases. And so, as to end this depressing monologue, my self-serving finale is that knowledge of the English language is speeding downhill. But what about the most wonderful true things? A child's laughter at just about anything. The myriad ways a loving or playful animal can bring you joy. A clean house, a delicious meal made by loving hands, a waft of perfume on a summer's day. A person you didn't expect becomes the best of all friends. Finding true purpose in life. Story 16. World War III was almost started due to a certain moon phase one night and a large flock of birds breaking the detection barrier at just the right time. The radar missile detection system in Alaska interpreted this as a warhead from Russia heading toward NYC with an impact time of less than 30 minutes. Due to the late hours when this transmission came in, made it almost impossible to get a ranked official on the phone to advise the crew on how to respond. Thankfully, a Canadian military officer knew of a meeting taking place in NYC with leaders from around the world and thought it to be ridiculous for Russia to fire warheads at a city housing their high-ranking officials and advised them to stand down. It goes to show that artificial intelligence will never replace the human element and that a lone Canadian saved the world. Story 17. At any moment we could be sucked into a black hole. We don't know enough about them to say that one will not form right in our solar system. Even a small one could draw everything towards it, ruining the balance that allows us to live here. There would be nothing to do besides wait for our inevitable death, possibly by spaghettification. If you are not familiar with that word, look it up and be terrified, because as others would see you falling into a black hole, you would be long gone and instantly turned into whatever is more liquefied than soup. Story 18. As a Christian, I don't mind talking to God or talking to myself. However, later I learned that not every thought is my own. 2 Corinthians 10:5. When I finally grasped this spiritual reality, it freaked me out that I wasn't alone in my mind. Then I realized the thing using my voice in my head can also not be my own. This also hit differently. Who else is talking? Experience. In this moment of my life, I was seeking God on a new level. I had been listening to a Christian radio app daily, and more than I had ever. One day my husband and I moved out from my in-laws to our own place. I had to unpack with my little one while hubby was at work. As I was unpacking, I was listening to Christian music, but also noticed I was irritated. I chalked it up to the stress of unpacking and didn't think much. Truth was, I was happy to finally be on our own. However, as soon as that passed, I heard a voice in my mind say, "Why does she have to listen to that music all the time?" Mind you, I never heard myself be talked about in my own mind ever, so I paused and thought, she? I wouldn't refer to myself in her, and certainly not at this moment. Then it dawned on me that not every thought or voice that passes through my mind is my own. I'm not as afraid as I was initially because I have faith in Jesus, but learning that made me dislike that it can happen. It's one thing to know you can have intrusive thoughts, but another to learn they're always there waiting to say something in first-person suggestions, and they're not there to play nice most times. Also, everyone hears that they're good at using I as a disguise. Story 19. The absolute enormity of the universe that surrounds us. It is quite literally, unfathomably huge. We're its eyes for a brief moment in time, then we're gone. Possibly even forever. We're born. We experience this world in whatever body we happen to be born in, which could be either a blessing or a curse, depending on universal luck. And then one day, we cease to exist. Our perception of time is tied to the gravitational field we happen to be walking around on. So time is a bit of a gray area because our perception of it is fucked. A year can go by and it can feel both long as hell and fast. We're just biding our time until we wither away and die. Make something beautiful. Be grateful for what you have. Work on yourself. Be kind, generous, forgiving. Allow people to be themselves, as long as it doesn't harm anyone else. Don't force your ideals on others. Let people go. We're quite literally all destined for the same fate. Story 20. The time that it takes to double the human population has recently slowed down to exponential growth. Constant doubling time of 47-48 years. Before, it was growing at a faster than exponential rate. Doubling time was getting shorter, not remaining constant. If this rate of growth continues, this means that in about 50 more years, 2073, the human population could be about 16 billion. Most people refuse to acknowledge that this could even happen, but it's definitely probable. Story 21. I don't have a fact to share but a thought. Humanity kind of sucks, and at every turn we can suffer a slow, painful death. A thought that worries me is other life in the universe. Are they going through similar statistics, or are they even worse than us on Earth? I've seen facts of rape, murder, cancer, disease, and natural disaster thus far, and I just wonder if the statistics for life out in the universe are better off, or if there is a society out there where rape and murder is accepted and as natural as breathing, or maybe cancer is as normal as a birthmark, and everyone just naturally dies that way. Sorry for the morbid thought, but all these facts are downers, and make me wonder if these experiences are shared universally or not. Story 22. If our current trends continue by 2050, a whole lot of bad shit will have happened. First, we've killed off the oceans. Severe overfishing means most fish stocks will be depleted by 2050. By 2050, we will need every bit of arable land just to feed people. That means we can't use any of the arable land to raise livestock. The problem is that we will also need all the arable land to grow the feed for all the livestock we eat. So there clearly is not going to be enough food for everyone before 2050 ever gets here. Water scarcity is also going to be a severe problem because of global warming. There will be a strong shift to desalination, which will lead to huge amounts of salt being dumped into the ocean, which already have issues with fertilizers and animal waste being dumped into the oceans. The salt problem will make it worse, much worse. Enjoy those non-GMO grains, fruit and vegetables, because it won't be long before we just won't be able to waste arable land on low-yielding crops, especially with evidence growing that there is no benefit to eating organically grown food. I mean, the whole GMA thing only started because Europe wanted an excuse to block US agriculture from competing against Europeans. But with Monsanto in Bayer's hands, I've already seen this starting to change with the publishing of studies showing genetically modified fruits, vegetables, and grains are harmless. So it's really going to suck. I mean, not for me, I'll be dead. Looks like everything is going to last about as long as my lifespan if I don't live too long. But for young people, it's going to suck. Go watch Soylent Green. That's the future we are really headed toward. Story 23. The greater honey guide is a bird that drops its eggs into other birds' nests. When born, the chick has 2 teeth at the end of its beak. It then uses that beak to destroy the other eggs, kill the other birds in the nest. So the mama bird returns to a war zone nest and basically has to raise the chick that slaughtered its babies. It loses the teeth about 2 days after being born. Birds are savage. Story 24. A pistol shrimp claw can move at a speed of 97 kilometers per hour. The speed of the snap is such that a bubble is created consisting of a vacuum. The internal low pressure causes a water pulse that immobilizes prey with an associated noise of 218 decibels, which is louder than a bullet, and reportedly a temperature of 4,800 degrees centigrade, which is similar to the surface temperature of the sun, albeit over a very small area. Story 25. The last time the guillotine was used as a capital punishment was in the same year as the release of the first Star Wars movie. In 1977, Hamida Jandubi was sentenced to death by guillotine for torturing and the murder of a 21-year-old woman. On September 10, 1977, Jandubi became the last person on Earth to be beheaded by a guillotine. Jandubi wasn't the last person to be sentenced to death by guillotine, but they all got spared, and in 1981, capital punishment was completely banned from France, thus ending the reign of the guillotine. Story 26. Horses are literally the worst suited animals for survival sometimes. They are very negatively affected by black walnuts. Even standing in a pile of the shavings for just an hour will start hurting them. As time goes on, they will develop very painful and dangerous laminitis, which will affect them for the rest of their lives and could kill them. If you have a stall with 20 pounds of pine shavings in it, and you add a single handful of black walnut shavings, the horse will still be affected. And if they have founder laminitis, you cannot feed them the most nutritious hay, alfalfa, because eating that hay will make their laminitis worse. They can eat too fast and get a ball of feed stuck in their throat that you have to massage unstuck or use a tube down their nose to unblock. They cannot puke. If they get colic and you can't get them to fart, basically, their stomach pops. They're an extremely strong, durable animal, but if they bonk a spot on the top of their head with just a little too much force, they die instantly, or it picks their spinal cord up and they are paralyzed and have to be put down. They can carry 150 pounds on their back or more in a cart, but if they bonk their neck on, say, a tree limb a bit too hard, they can break their spine. Sometimes horses just search for ways to kill themselves. I had a horse who got a minor injury, recovered, and then 4 months later went to sleep and died. The vet said he was perfectly healthy and had no reason to die, so he thinks the horse just decided, I'm gonna go die in my sleep, and just kind of forced it to happen. Story 27. A neutron star is a star that has burned through all of its fuel by fusing heavier and heavier elements to keep its gravity at bay. Once all fuel is consumed, the star can no longer push back on the immense gravity. Once it goes supernova, it's so compressed by gravity that it leaves behind a neutron core. Because of its angular momentum, it rotates at an unbelievable speed. The Earth rotates once every 24 hours. The fastest neutron stars detected rotate 716 times per second. If you were to stand on its surface, the ground would be moving at a quarter the speed of light. A neutron star is one of the densest objects in the universe. Imagine an object a mile across, but with a mass of 2.5 million Earths. Their magnetic field is between 100 million to 1 quadrillion times stronger than Earth's magnetic field. The gravity at the neutron star's surface is about 2 times 1011, 200 billion, times that of Earth's gravitational field. It is one of the deadliest objects in the universe. Oh, and 1 teaspoon of it weighs something like 357 trillion pounds, about as much as Mount Everest.